Hello everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of An American in Thailand, airing every Friday. This program is broadcast to you from Ratchamakon University of Technology, Peranakan. I'll be bringing this program to you in two parts. For the first part, we will introduce a certain topic about being an American here living in Thailand. Could be about food, travel, culture, weather, anything like that. We'll then take a break, and in the second part of the program, we'll get into some more examples and specifics of the topic that we're discussing. All right, let's get to the program. Welcome everyone, my name is Gary Gray, and I am your host for An American in Thailand. I obviously am an American, and I have been living here in Thailand for over 8 years now, teaching English here at Ratchamakon University of Technology, Peranakan. And since I've been here so long, I kind of feel like I understand quite a bit about Thailand. I'm still learning new things every day, but I have enough knowledge now that I can kind of talk about some of the differences between Thailand and the United States. I say in many of my episodes that when I talk about being an American, I mean I'm from the United States. Some people from other parts of the Americas, like Canada, Mexico, South America, get upset when people from the US call themselves Americans because they are Americans too. We don't mean any offense. We have no other term for it. That's what we are. We don't call ourselves United Staters. That's not a thing. That's not a word. That's not a phrase. I'm sorry. That's what we're called, Americans. So, we don't mean to offend anyone when we say that. We do understand that technically, because Canada, Mexico, all of those places, all of the countries in the Caribbean, they're all part of North or South America. If you go down to Brazil, Argentina, all those countries down there, they're all part of the Americas. I understand that. So we are all Americans, yes. But in terms of what we call ourselves as a nationality, that's just the word. Sorry. People from the United States are called Americans. And remember, because it is not meant to be offensive, remember that is in the name of our country. That's why we use that term. It is the United States of America. So that's why we are Americans. Okay, so enough about that. I just feel like I have to explain that in a lot of episodes because some people get upset when people from the U.S. call themselves Americans. Because they're American too if they're from Canada or something like that. That's why we do it. So, I am an American English teacher here in Thailand. Been here a long time. So, I understand quite a bit about Thailand. Like I said, I don't know everything. I'm still learning new things. And so today, for today's topic, we're going to talk about flooding. Flooding. That's a weird topic, right? And we've done other discussions on weather. Why are we going to talk about flooding? Okay, well, I saw some or heard some folks complaining about the flooding here in Thailand, and they were foreigners. So I want to address this topic. There was recently some flooding in Thailand, central Thailand. I say recently. We're recording this in November of 2025. We had a typhoon, Kalmeji, I believe was the name. I think that's correct, Kalmeji. Hit Vietnam, traveled across Cambodia, and then into Thailand. So, crossing all that land, of course, it was pretty much dead by the time it got here. So there wasn't a lot of wind or anything. But it still had some rain left. And it caused some flooding in central Thailand. And we get flooding a lot here in Thailand. In fact, right here in Bangkok, because of all that water that they got in central Thailand, it's going to flow down the Chao Phraya River. And here in Bangkok, I've been seeing some of the places near the river, I've been seeing some places have sandbags set up to try to keep the water away. I saw some at a location near one of our other campuses just yesterday, the day before I'm recording this. So we get flooding quite often here. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I did see or hear a foreigner complain about this, saying, well, why can't Thailand do a better job of flood control, water control? What other countries don't have this problem. Well, first of all, a lot of other countries do have this problem, but that's beside the point. So I want to explain this issue today. And I'm not going to try to pick sides, really, about, oh, is the Thai government to blame because they're not doing enough, or is this just Mother Nature? Well, we are going to talk about it, but I think what you're going to find is that mostly it's not going to be the Thai government that's to blame. There's maybe a few things they could do better. Everyone can do stuff better, right? So there's maybe I can teach better. There's a few things we can all do better. But I'm going to explain that it's mostly Mother Nature. So there's two things here going on that are kind of related. And one of them has to do with the people that are doing the complaining. And we'll talk about that second. The first thing I want to explain is why we get so much flooding here in the first place. Well, you probably know this already because you live here. If you're watching this in Thailand or listening to this here in Thailand, you probably know already that when it rains, it can rain very heavily. That happens in tropical areas. Why does that happen in tropical areas? Well, my background when I was in America was in meteorology. That is the science of weather. So I can actually explain this to you. As you heat things up, they usually expand. I say usually. There are a couple things that are a little weird that don't do that. Like ice. When you freeze it, it expands. Water. When you freeze it, the ice expands. That's unusual. Most things, when you heat them up, they expand. That includes the air. That includes the air. So when you live in an area where it is hotter, there is more depth to the entire atmosphere, or at least the lower part of the atmosphere. Let me put it that way. And that's where the weather is mostly taking place, is in the lower part of the atmosphere. So it is deeper. And if it's deeper, there's more space for what? Water. There's more space to put the water in. You just have a bigger container. It's as simple as that. So when it rains more. That's why we get more flooding. There's just more water. It really is just as simple as that. The atmosphere is thicker. It's just like a bigger container. It holds more water. And so when that water comes out, more water falls. And more water that falls means it's easier to get flooding. It really is just that simple. And so to the second part of the issue was about the people complaining. This was a native English speaker. I don't think they really understand the problem. A native English speaker has probably rarely had to deal with anything like this. Think about where English is the native language. United States, Canada, Ireland, United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand. There is almost no tropical weather in any of those places. Northern Australia can be, yes. They're in the southern hemisphere, so of course the further north you get, you're getting closer to the equator, the hotter it gets. So northern Australia, yeah, sort of. It can get pretty hot there. pretty hot and tropical there. The very southernmost part of the United States, Texas, Florida, Louisiana, places like that, yes, that can get tropical, especially in the summertime. In the middle of winter, it's not very tropical there, but in the summer it can. And so the vast majority of these places, these native English-speaking places, and that's where this person was from. I don't know where. I just know that he was a native English speaker. A white person like me, native English speaker. He's probably never seen tropical rainfall ever in his life, except on his travels and except when he's here. I don't know if he lives here or was visiting. I assume he lives here. I mean, unless you live in one of those few little areas I mentioned, like Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, some of those places in the summer, yes, it can be very tropical. But here's the thing. In those few little areas where it actually is tropical, they do get floods like this. Whenever they get heavy rain. There was just one, I think it was just earlier this year. There was one earlier this year in the United States, in Texas. Killed a lot of people. Massive flooding. Killed a tremendous number of people. So it does happen. It does happen. And a lot of times it happens with the same type of storms, with hurricanes. It wasn't like that with the one earlier this year, but Texas has had severe flooding due to hurricanes before. Just last year, North Carolina had major flooding from a hurricane. It does happen there. It does happen. So there's really almost no difference. The problem with this person is that they've probably never seen it. They probably come from Australia, and it's probably a non-tropical area because most of the higher population areas in Australia are non-tropical. They can get quite warm in the summer. Sure. I mean, they're still north far enough. They still get pretty warm in the summer, but it's not really a tropical area where most of the big population centers are. So they probably come from Australia, New Zealand, Canada, or most of the United States, or maybe Great Britain. I mean, they probably are not used to this type of environment. All right. So I think this person is just not well informed about the problem of flooding. All right, so we're going to go ahead and take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll talk a little bit more about that and a little bit more about the problems with controlling the flooding. All right, so let's take a quick break. Welcome back, everyone. All right, so we're talking about flooding today. And in the first part of the program, we talked about kind of why the flooding occurs just in general, because we're in a tropical environment. We also talked about some folks who may not be familiar with it not understanding the difficulty of why it's hard to control the water, why it's hard to control that flooding. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more here, because here's where maybe you could get into blaming the government. They don't do enough to control it. I honestly don't think that's really the biggest problem here. Part of it is really just Mother Nature. There's just too much water. There's nothing you can do about it a lot of times. As I explained, even in the southern part of the United States, it happens all the time. All the time they're getting flooding there whenever a major storm comes through, whether it's thunderstorms or whether it's a hurricane, which is the same thing as a typhoon. They call them hurricanes over there. Same type of storm. So whether it's a hurricane or a thunderstorm, happens all the time there too. It just does. It happens multiple times in any year, and it's usually in those tropical areas. I mean, sometimes you'll get them further north from just normal storms. If it rains long enough, if they're in a pattern where it just rains and rains and rains and rains and rains, but it usually takes longer time, a longer duration of rain when you're up in the northern areas to get that sort of flooding. Because as I explained in the first part of the program, the atmosphere is not going to hold as much water when you're in a colder environment. So it's going to take constantly feeding more and more moisture in, so it's going to take a longer time period to get that type of flooding rain in northern areas, so it doesn't happen as often in those parts of, say, the United States, like the northern part of the United States. Like if you're talking about New York or Michigan or Minnesota, places like that, doesn't happen as often. Certainly happens. Absolutely. I have seen some very bad flooding in both New York and in Michigan. Sure, it happens, but less often. Less often. It's usually in those tropical areas. Like they get floods almost every year in Texas. You may say, well, then why does anyone live there? Well, Texas is a big state. It doesn't flood in the same place every year in Texas. It's different places. But they get floods in Texas almost every year. Florida frequently gets floods. North Carolina does. Louisiana does. All those places down in the south frequently get flooding. And some of it's caused by other things as well. For example, in North Carolina, it's because they have mountains in the west, and that helps squeeze the water out. When the air hits the mountains, it kind of compresses and helps squeeze all that rain out. So that also helps with them getting a lot of rain. But again, it's still the amount of rain. You're getting too much rain. That's the same thing here. Same thing. So mostly the problem is just Mother Nature. We just get too much water. But as far as controlling the flow of it, there are other issues. And most of those are also not the fault of the Thai government. For example, some of this water is coming from other countries. I mean, just look at the example I gave here in Bangkok. They got sandbags up, worried about the Chao Phraya flooding. I think the flooding threat is gone, I think, maybe, I'm not sure. As of the time I'm recording this, I think it was from a few days ago. I can tell you, living here in Bangkok, when the leftovers of Typhoon Kalmaji came through, we didn't get any rain. Not a single drop of rain. So why is the Chao Phraya going to flood? Because the water comes downstream, down the river. And some of these rivers don't start in Thailand. I can give you a perfect example of major flooding that they had in Nong Khai. This was, I think, earlier this year. Maybe it was even last year, but I think it was earlier this year. They had major flooding in Nong Khai. They didn't get that much rain there. Oh, it rained kind of a lot, off and on. It rained a pretty good amount, but it was just normal Thailand thunderstorms in the afternoon. It rains, okay. No, the rain fell in China with typhoon after typhoon after typhoon. And that's where the Mekong River starts. So all this water got dumped into the Mekong River in China, and a few days later, it comes downstream and floods Nong Khai. There is nothing Thailand can do to prevent that. There's nothing the Thai government or anyone else can do to prevent that. That water came from someplace else. There is nothing you're going to do about it. I mean, the only thing you can try to do is the city, like Nong Khai, should be built up high on the banks. Well, they already do that, which is why it doesn't flood there very often. Which is kind of amazing. It's flooded there twice just this year. The second one wasn't as bad. But that's exactly what they do. They try to build the town up so it's protected. So they've already done that. It's just that this time, the river got really, really, really high. So it still went over the banks and flooded the city. So again, nothing you can do about that. There's nothing Thailand can do about that. It's just a very difficult, complicated problem to control. It's a difficult problem to solve. Number one, you have the first problem I mentioned, that it just rains too much. There's just nothing you can do. I mean, there's just too much rain. It's where we live. It's Thailand. Like I said, it happens even in the rich countries that have all kinds of systems to try to protect against that. It floods in Texas all the time, in Florida, North Carolina, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. They get floods all the time in those tropical areas of the United States. Floods there all the time, too. There's just too much rain. That's problem number one. Problem number two, some of the water is coming from places where it's not even in our control. Even if we could control it, which you probably couldn't anyway, like I just said, you probably can't control it anyway. But if you could control it, it's still out of our control. It's coming from other countries, coming from China, Laos. I don't think there's any rivers where it would come from Myanmar. There might, out towards Kanchanaburi. There could be. I could be wrong about that. But I don't think that, but there may not be. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we have any rivers that come from Myanmar. Cambodia, well, the Mekong goes down there as well, but that's more coming from the north, so I don't think there's any rivers coming in from Cambodia either. And just because of the direction the rivers flow from and the fact that our border is so small with them, there's also not going to be any coming from Malaysia. So there's nothing from Malaysia. It's mostly really just China. I mean, Laos as well, but that's really ones that come from China to Laos to Cambodia. And the river, the biggest river there, the Mekong, is actually the border of Laos and China, Laos and Thailand. So it's not really coming from Laos. It's really China. So we get a lot of water that comes down from China. Not our control. Okay, now could there possibly be a little bit of responsibility on the part of the Thai government not doing enough? I suppose it's possible. You know, Thailand is not as wealthy a country as, say, the United States, so there may be limited resources. Maybe they don't have enough barriers built along riverways that where the river is going through a big town or a city. Maybe they don't have enough barriers. Maybe they don't. Maybe their flood control, like when they're releasing water from dams, which they do from time to time because they have reservoirs where they keep water. Maybe they're not quite as sophisticated enough with doing that. They're not quite as good at that. Perhaps. I'm not even sure if that's true, by the way, so I absolutely am not blaming the government. I'm just saying that it's possible that maybe the government could possibly do something a little bit better, do a little bit more, be a little bit smarter about like how they're releasing water, when, at what rate, all those sorts of things. So there might be a few little things they could do to improve flood control, water control, and reduce the flooding risk. There may be a few things. But honestly, mostly, it's just Mother Nature. It's where we live. I'll go back to, for the third time, something I mentioned, maybe the fourth time by now. I know I'm repeating myself, but it's important to point this out. Because the person I heard complaining about this was a white person, native English speaker. They were acting like this isn't a problem in other countries. Where are you from? Where is this person from? Great Britain? Yeah, because it doesn't rain there like it does here. Oh yeah, it rains almost every day in Great Britain. They get some pretty nasty weather. But not with this intensity. They don't have this problem. Wherever he's from, that person that was complaining, they probably don't have this problem. There are only a few limited areas in countries which are native English-speaking countries that have a similar problem. And it's mostly just the southern United States during the summer. That's it. But guess what? They do have this problem there. There's nothing you can do. It's Mother Nature. That's why it happens. I mean, I don't want to say there's nothing you can do. Like I said, in Nong Khai, they try to build the city up a little bit high to keep it away from the river. And it generally works. It does not flood there very often. I think the floods they got this year, I think that was the first time in like 20 years it has flooded like that. Yeah, it doesn't usually flood there. They have done something about it. So I shouldn't say there's nothing you can do about it. there are things you can do. There's just no way to completely prevent flooding. You cannot control the water to that degree. It's just Mother Nature. We live in the tropics. The rain is heavy. It's going to flood. So, that's the story on flooding. And I just wanted to explain that because, like I said, I heard some Farangs here in Thailand just talking nonsense about the flooding here in Thailand and talking about how unnecessary it was because the government's not doing anything to control the flooding, blah, 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 whatever. It's just pure nonsense. There is almost nothing you can do. Again, I don't want to say nothing. There are things you can do to help control the water. And it is possible the government could do a little more. I don't know. I'm not an expert on their flood control policies. Maybe there are things they could do, but there's not a lot. There's not a lot you're going to do to prevent flooding here in Thailand. We live in a tropical environment. It rains a lot. It's going to flood sometimes. We just have to live with that here in Thailand. It's just one of the things we have to live with. Okay, so that is my take on the flooding here in Thailand. All right, so that's going to be it for today's program. Thank you for joining us for the latest episode of An American in Thailand. Let me reach out to any of the young people out there who may be listening. If they're going to be off to university sometime soon, why not consider our university here, Ratchamakan, University of Technology, Peranakan. We have a great little university here, and we are even expanding. We're starting an international program here soon. We are expanding. We are a growing university, and I like to think we have some pretty good staff here, so consider our university. All right, please stay with us, and tune back in next week for another interesting episode. Also, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you.